wherein information is disseminated of the day. I'm going to introduce Riona MacNamara, who I met for the first time, I believe, in Prague. She is amazing. She's like my muse. And she will act as the moderator for this panel. So I'm going to defer everything to her now. Give her a warm welcome. She's amazing.
Hey, cool. Is this working? It's totally working. So I'm Riona. I am a staff technical writer at Google, working in developer infrastructure. And basically, there are two things that I care about and two things that I want to talk about. One is Beyoncé's Lemonade, and the other one is transforming documentation processes. I have said that I'm going to try and keep this talk focused on one of those things. So, why is transforming the documentation process so important? It's because the world is changing. We can feel it in the water. We can smell it in the air. It is changing. The tools and processes that we used to use are not working for us anymore. And did anybody see the Stack Overflow 2016 developer survey? It was pretty interesting because the #1 and #2 problems that external developers identified as impacting productivity, they were around documentation. And this really mirrors the experience that we had internally at Google, that for years, the #1 productivity issue was the inability of engineers to find trustworthy, reliable documentation that they needed to do their jobs. So this is particularly interesting for us because this is actually my third Portland Write the Docs. And 2 years ago I came and there was a really great talk by the Twitter team. Did anybody see that talk? Was anybody here too? It was awesome. Why don't we keep the docs with the code? Why are they separate from the document, from the coding process when we're talking about engineering docs? And while this was going on, I was tweeting and texting my coworker Aaron, who is somewhere in the audience, and saying this is exactly what we should be doing. And so last year, as a result of this, we started building an internal documentation platform for Google and came and talked about it last year. And at that stage, we were still a volunteer team, and we had about 1,600 projects using our platform. Flash forward now, we actually now have a staffed engineering team, and we are just about to hit 10,000 projects using our platform. So a lot of our documentation processes have been transformed, but it's not enough. We have an awful lot of way to go. And that's why I'm really excited to be doing this panel, because the 4 speakers who are here are attacking this similar problem, but all in different domains and in different ways. As you probably know, so the format is going to be the contributors, Leon, Zach, Ted, and John are going to give a brief 5-minute overview. And hopefully everybody knows that you can ask questions during Slack, over Slack. We don't guarantee that we'll be able to get to all the questions, but it's definitely, we want to hear your thoughts. And that's how it's going to go down. So, first up, let's talk to Leon, and he's going to give an introduction to.
You guys hear me okay? All right. Hi, I'm Leon. I work for a company called Balsamic. So last year, we transformed both our documentation platform and our workflow. So this was our documentation platform for about 5 years. This is the desk.com knowledge base CMS. It was okay, but not great. One of our biggest frustrations is that anytime you made a change and saved it, it would update it live. So we didn't really have an easy way to work on future versions of our documentation before releasing them. So at Balsamic, when you have an idea for something, you put it on a wiki. So I started out by just writing up some of the pain points with our current workflow and just kind of brainstorming some ideas for how we might change it. And some of these screenshots are going to be kind of hard to read, but it's not really about what's on them, so don't worry about it. Also, I'm going to go through these kind of fast, and then we can talk about them more later. So we did investigate a couple of other CMS options, but in the end, we decided to go 5 blades and build it ourselves. So we assembled a team, myself, Mike, who's our lead designer and front-end developer, and our CEO, actually, Peldi, who's also our kind of our de facto sysadmin. So the design and planning tools, we use Confluence, which is our wiki, and then Balsamic Mockups, which is the tool that we make. So here's some wireframes that we created for the visual layout, the information architecture, some of the navigation between screens. And then we moved to the wiki. And mostly what we relied on is checklists, lots of checklists. There's lots of small tasks to be done in this project. Also, we work remotely and asynchronously, so using this format was really helpful. More checklists. This one also has a little diagram of how we're going to map the content from our old platform to the new one. And then finally, our launch checklist, the most important one of all. We had one day dedicated as our Launchapalooza, because we were basically just going to flip the switch and do everything all at once. So it was really important that we dotted our T's and crossed all of our I's, and we kind of held our breath, and luckily everything worked. So this is docs.balsamic.com. This is the end result. We actually decided to create 2 documentation sites. So this is docs. This is kind of for the user guide, the manual. And then a couple months later, we released support.balsamic.com, which is more for FAQs, tutorials, things like that. But we do have search that searches across both of them. So that's kind of working for us. So here's our workflow for publishing. So we use Hugo, which is a static site generator. It's a lot like Jekyll, except it's faster and less well documented. Markdown, of course, and GitHub for version control, and then we use Amazon S3 as our content delivery network, so the pages load really fast. So the first step is we run Hugo from the command line locally, so it just kind of runs in the background and watches the content directory and recompiles it to HTML when you make changes. Use a Markdown editor of our choice with all the front matter at the top. And then that allows us to preview the entire site locally while we're working on it, which is really nice. And then when we're ready to check in our changes, we use the GitHub app and check in the changes. And what that does is that pushes the changes to a staging URL, which is a public URL, so that everybody in the company can see the preview site before we push it live. So here's our GitHub repository. It's public if anybody wants to take a look at the code. So when we decide that we want to release, we do a pull request and we merge the staging branch into the release branch, which automatically pushes it out to the content delivery network. So that's how we push our docs live. A few other supporting resources to mention for the discussion purposes. Near the end of the process, we started using a static site CMS called forestry.io. It's in beta right now. It's actually really well done. SwiftType is the tool that we use for search. And last but not least, last year we hired 2 new customer support people, Virgin and Brendan, and we trained them on our new process. And so as Neil was advocating for, we have our customer support people writing docs as well, which we're really happy about. So that's our little scrapbook for 2015, and I'm happy to talk more about it.
Thank you so much, Leon. Zach.
Hey. So normally it's getting me to shut up that's the trick, not to get me talking. So I will try to make this as quick as possible. I'm talking today about transforming docs at enterprise scale at Rackspace. This was the project that we did over the end of 2014 and into 2015. And that grew out of Rackspace 2 years ago, or excuse me, Write the Docs 2 years ago. This shirt, it was a very productive, amazing, genius things came out of that talk from the Twitter folks. So I love this conference. All right, this is how you get at me if you want to express your outrage. I will note that these URLs are here, not so much because it's going to be useful now, sorry about the small type, and also sorry that there's so many of them. But if you are interested in following these later, this will be in the slide deck. So these are links to the sites that are going to be relevant. So who am I and why am I talking? I'm a documentarian who specializes in developer docs and empathetic information design. I love Write the Docs. I've been here since we were in that awful, awful place 4 years ago. It was perfectly fine, but it was very small. Yeah, I love this conference. It's important to note that the work of transformation that we did at Rackspace was intensely collaborative in all aspects. Many people across Rackspace contributed to our process of transformation and to its success, but most of the work, the leadership and strategy, the technical research and technical deep dives, the choices that we made for tool chains and migration paths, everything to do with anything in some capacity, most of that work came from a team of 3 people. It was myself, Ann Gentle, who is now at Cisco, and Margaret Ecker, who is here. Margaret, are you in the room? She's downstairs volunteering and making this conference possible. So I'm the one who's standing up here talking about all of this, but without Margaret and Ann and their technical leadership and contributions, this would never have begun, let alone succeeded. And in an industry that often erases the contributions of women, I feel like it's worth taking 30 seconds out of a 5-minute presentation to make sure that, that they get the credit that they are due. So what do I mean? Hopefully that's something we will never have to applaud again. So what do I mean by intensely collaborative? By intense, I mean that sometimes, frankly, we wanted to kill each other. Sometimes we wanted to band together and kill other people. We may have required cake and grief counseling frequently throughout the process. This transformation was not easy, but we got a lot done in a short time, and the effort was intense. When I submitted this talk proposal in February, I was still at Rackspace. I'm not there anymore. So I have some blind spots about the results and result metrics. So just keep that in mind, that I will not be able to offer as much specificity about the end result as I would like to. So what did we do? We consolidated developer docs that were spread across 5 different subdomains. We consolidated them into one. We replaced the entire publishing tooling chain with better tools, better uses of existing tools, and smarter infrastructure. We had moved from a content authoring system that used DocBook, Oxygen XML editor, transformations of that content that happened through Maven, published into a static site with Sphinx HTML with hybrid Jekyll front matter to sort of bind it unwillingly into the rest of the site. And the whole thing was running on Apache. And what we have migrated to is content authored in Markdown and restructured text that is transformed with Sphinx HTML and Sphinx JSON and published on a Rackspace house-built engine called dconst. Dconst is amazing. The thing that's most important to know about dconst is that all of the layers are abstracted from each other completely. Authoring is abstracted from transformation and interpretation, which is abstracted from the front matter, which is abstracted from presentation. How we did it, we began and stayed true to a clear vision. We built ally relationships with other stakeholders. We treated docs like code. That's sort of a lazy shorthand. We can talk more about that later. And we tried to meet the needs of as many people as possible in the place where they overlapped. Why does it matter? We paid down huge technical debt. We reduced the barriers to contribution. We changed how we thought about ourselves and what we do, and we made our users happy and the world a slightly better place. If you are thinking about doing yourself, here's what I wish that someone had told me at the beginning. Know what you want to do and work backwards, and then don't wait to begin. If you need everything nailed down, you will never start. Innovate. No one has ever done this before. Well, everyone up here has, but no one has ever done your migration before. So fail forward with gusto. You do know what you're doing. You're innovating, and innovating means finding ways not to do something. Accept critique but bias to action. Let people get feedback, but don't let people stop you from doing the thing that you need to do.
We're over time.
I'm so sorry. We'll wrap it up. Do the thing, be awesome at it.
Thank you. So, next up is Ted Hudek. Oh, no.
Hello, fellow documentarians.
Hello. Oh.
My name is Ted Hudek, and I write developer docs at Microsoft. Not just any developer docs, but really nerdy stuff about Windows device drivers. Last year, I came to write the docs for the first time, and it blew me away. It was the first time I'd heard about GitHub and Markdown. I attended Riona's excellent talk about how she transformed the doc process at Google. I began to see how this might work for us. Since then, docs at Microsoft have been through a small revolution. In the next 5 minutes, I'm going to show you how we got writers writing faster, gave writers the power to update topics instantly, and enabled community contributions for our content. I love this picture. This is a picture of the Prawn Nebula, which is approximately 6,000 light years from Earth, which takes us back to approximately the time when our old authoring system was developed. Our old authoring system was great as long as you were an experienced writer on our team. Just setting it up was a bit complicated. Before you could start writing, you had to set up a private enlistment, install a bunch of customized authoring tools, and learn a specialized XML schema. This is actually a schematic for a bowling pin setter, which looks slightly simpler than our old rig. When you wanted to publish, you had to wait for the weekly publishing train. What about contributions? Well, not so much. Only writers could contribute. If someone on a feature team had a suggestion or a rewrite, first they'd have to find the relevant writer, file a bug, and then maybe email Word docs back and forth. The doc source was truly locked away and only accessible to the inner circle of documentarians. And then, I came back from the conference last year with some ideas, and I discovered that open doc efforts were already underway across the company. I eagerly pitched in, and within 6 months, we published our team's first small set of content sourced from Markdown, shared via GitHub, and rendered directly onto MSDN. Since then, we've published over 5,000 topics. Let me tell you how it works. It's a lot simpler. Content lives in Markdown on GitHub. When you commit, a webhook fires and the content gets staged onto internal web servers. We iterate in the pull request, and when folks agree the content is ready, we push it to the deployment branch on GitHub. Within minutes, the content is live on MSDN. All of a sudden, writers have the power to update topics instantly. Let's look more closely at the rendered page. There are a couple cool things to note here. First, in the upper right, you'll see a contribute button. Click that, and you're teleported directly to the relevant Markdown page on GitHub. Below that is a branch dropdown. In your repo, you might have multiple branches with different versions of the same topic. you can switch between the rendered versions of those topics by using that branch dropdown. Also, you'll see an author's byline, which you can set in the YAML block in your Markdown file. If you click on the byline, it takes you to the author's GitHub profile page. Suddenly, we have a system that is trivial to learn, lightning fast to publish, and enables collaboration in a massive way. We're just starting our open doc journey, learning a lot as we go, but reception so far has been positive. When we tell our feature teams about the new system, they are amazed that they have this new power. So it's remarkable when I think back to a year ago when the open doc idea was new to me. It's been a blast being part of this huge transition and seeing the delight it brings our internal readers and writers. Now anybody at Microsoft can write the docs. If you have questions, we're going to have an unconference session tomorrow at 3:20, and there's a blog post there that describes how we're also improving readability and performance on different size devices, and some photo credits. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Next up is John Bulava from Twitter.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is John Bulava. I'm the editor-in-chief of developer relations at Twitter. I have an engineering background. I know there's only a few of us out there. So I have a master's degree in computer science, became a developer advocate at Twitter, and then recently wound up in this role. So I oversee all the content that we push out for external developers, whether that's on the blog, whether it's video content that we want to publish, or even some longer walkthroughs that we've started to put on dev.twitter.com, and that's actually the focus of what I want to talk about. So dev.twitter.com is our external documentation. I'm not related to the internal documentation team. They're the ones that are doing the awesome talks of previous years, so I can take no credit for that. But I'm glad that now we're a part of this and we're breaking down that wall between the two documentation teams. So dev.twitter.com currently, because we're in the middle of this transition, is on an internal Drupal build. So if you're not familiar with Drupal, it's a PHP CMS system. And it's actually used throughout the company. So it's very handy for a lot of people to use the same system to make websites for people outside of Twitter. The problem is it's very limiting for someone who wants to make a developer website. So things like a subset of HTML, we can't put JavaScript inside, and the templates, there's no exception to the templates. So if we had an endpoint that maybe could benefit from a gallery of photos or a different format, that's not possible. And the other thing is, any other parts of the website are not inside the database. So if I just wanted to update the copyright date on the site, that actually requires an entire deploy of the entire gazebo system, that was what we call it, externally for the entire company. So that would be waiting for that slow, rusted developer deployment train to get that stuff happening. So now we've been trying to think about how we can update this process, and so we're currently in this. And so the leading approach that we're looking at right now is using Sphinx, which seems to be very popular here, for building the documentation, and restructured text. So using these flat files and throwing a theme at it and then building these beautiful web pages. But we still haven't figured out all the problems yet. There's a lot of things such as, where do we host all these RTS files? If we do it internally, which is the most secure way to do it, then it's easy for our engineers to get involved. And it's already like on their laptops. They have access to source. But you know, it's a little bit limiting, because in a perfect world, I would love to open source the documentation. There's a lot of issues with that, because how great would it be if we can have people contributing to the Twitter documentation, which is used so often. The other thing is, it's not easy for are people who are non-technical. I'm technically on the marketing team for developer relations, and so they aren't technical folks. It's not what their focus is. So for them to actually learn our entire onboarding process for engineers to use our internal repo isn't the best, and even using GitHub might be difficult. So we still need to figure out those things of how people on the marketing team can update our product pages. So that's just a few examples of things we still need to work through. I am open to any feedback that you have if you've used our docs, or if you haven't and if you have any ideas for us or thoughts, just tweet with hashtag #TwitterDocs. I will see every tweet. I will read every tweet that you sent, I swear. So you can tweet at me directly at @JBulava, or you can reach the entire developer relations team with @TwitterDev. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Turn this around.
So those are pretty different efforts that we went on with your teams. One of the things I notice is that we talk a lot about tools and processes, but I think almost everybody talked about culture in some way. Zach talked about the requirement for intense collaboration and Ted talked a lot about open doc culture, moving from a really closed system to an open system, and John also touched on that. Were there any other kind of cultural issues that you faced when you were doing this? For example, in our world, at Google, one of the challenges we faced is, I think the documentation was where testing was about 10 years ago. It was often done ad hoc, or it wasn't done this. It was not an integral part of engineering culture. So we're like, how do we make that happen to make it as integral as testing? So, Ted.
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely been a transition because writers seem to be more attached to the old processes, maybe even than the future team writers, at least is what our team's experience has been. So, sometimes writers maybe miss a feature that they had in the old authoring system. So that's been part of the cultural change. Just the fact that we're kind of building the new system, like we're sort of building out the highway while we're driving down it. So, features are being added weekly. So that's been a big part of the transition for us. Feature teams are pretty excited to have this new power. For a long time, they were used to this old model where everything was locked away. They had to, find the writer and you use some archaic way, and then it's on the writer to do this manual integration, which really doesn't add a whole lot of value.
Cool. Ted, John, looks like you have something to say.
I think Twitter is in an interesting situation because I wasn't around when the first API documentation came out, but it was a small subset. It was one team, the developer relations team, just did the docs, and so that was it. And as the platform grew, we have so many engineers now, thousands of engineers, and the products just keep building. But the culture stayed the same. So you have the stress that's now on the team of, well, that team's supposed to do the docs, but we have so many different APIs now. And I think it's still a challenge that we have to face, and I'm sure other people have seen that. And that you should be aware of that, of how your team and how your product is going to scale when you're approaching documentation and who owns it. We do have teams that are becoming aware of this and owning their own documentation. Even with one of the latest things is uploading video through our API, and that entire media platform team has owned the documentation process. And it's been great working with them on how they should do that, what's the voice for it, and they just own it, so it's just in their process. And so we need more of that, and I think that's really going to help scale the documentation.
Do you have a... Yep.
Sure. So I'm very fortunate that we're a very small company. We were 10 people when I started, and we're 20 people now, and that feels huge to us. So things move really fast, and everybody knows each other. And you know, I think the person who was most resistant to it was me, just because I felt some ownership over the docs, and I didn't want anything to break. And but everybody else is used to things moving fast, and they were all gung ho about it. So we didn't really have that cultural inertia that exists at larger companies.
Mm-hmm.
There were two major sites of change, internal to our team and external to our team.
Mm-hmm.
We faced something very similar that you did, Ted, which was a model of documentation that had technical writers as sole contributors, that they were wielders of the arcane fire. They were the only ones who were able to successfully manage and had permissions to make changes to docs. So transforming our own identity to not just creators, but curators and enablers of content. And then also managing relationships externally, because developers and other contributors had gotten used to that model where if they had an idea or an update, they couldn't do it. So building relationships to say, yes, you can, and we want you to do it this way. This is not grudging. We want to help you, and we want you to help us. So that kind of cultural change there of building relationships of trust, and also trust that that we were not losing value by making this kind of change, by relinquishing sole power, that we were actually adding more value after that.
Does any of the panel feel that within your company the perception of writers has changed as a result of what you've done?
At least at Microsoft, I think it's so early that it's hard to say. Some writers may be fearful of becoming less relevant, but maybe it frees up writers to do the higher level conceptual work where you're tying scenarios together instead of documenting individual APIs down at the lower level. For us, at least to this point, it's still been more of a value add, where contributors are sort of filling in holes, and not yet creating whole new sets of documentation. But that's one of the questions: is how does our role evolve as content creators? As soon as the rest of the world is creating content.
Which is a really great question also, because I think one of the challenges that we had at Google was we'd been trying to fix these issues for years, and we tried different approaches. Top down, this is what you should do, but that doesn't fly. And we tried bottom up, and that didn't scale, going in and helping individual teams. And in the end, to be honest, we found that engineers didn't really want to be told what to do by technical writers, so we enlisted support mostly from engineering leadership and things. How did you get the alliances to push this change forward and to drive this innovation? Who would like to answer that?
So for me, one of the real takeaways for me is that the other people who worked on this viewed it as a side project, and people get really excited about side projects. There are not as many constraints. It's kind of this greenfield thing that developers love. Like, ooh, something new that's just brand new. I can use new technologies. And so the idea of working on something that was brand new and that wasn't directly related to their main job was really exciting. So it was actually a way to get people excited about something that was work related, but yet was refreshing and something new. So that we definitely hooked the development team by offering them something fresh.
Cool. John, do you? Yep.
One thing we've done on my team is so we have it's a pretty big org chart. We have 100+ technical writers in my group, larger group. So I started a V team where we have a representative from each lead in that org, and we come together weekly. It's kind of a Scrum format where we figure out what the current status is, what are the features that we need to develop more, to just kind of get a consensus, and then those representatives can go back to their teams and be a true representative and find out what people need, and then I take that feedback and I go back to the engineering team, who's actually building the framework that enables all this, and that enables our group to speak with a more cohesive voice, having representatives from all the different sub-teams.
Anyone else want to answer that? Or?
So at Rackspace, the developers and engineers were our allies from the start because it meant having fewer subdomains for them to maintain. It meant ultimately a net gain of available resources for engineering. And so when they found out about what it is that we were wanting to do, they were like, oh yes, please let us join. And that very naturally led to, because we were already collaborating on a common set of goals, it made it very easy to get buy-in on engineers creating content. And if you look at the site for Carina, getcarina.com/docs, most of that content is created by engineers and developers, and that has been improved and helped to shine in its final presentation by technical writers.
That's awesome. So here is a question that is coming in for the audience that several people have +1, is that it seems that a lot of people on the stage, they were saying we need to fix this, and the way to do it is to roll our own tool. Did you look at other processes or tools, and why did you reject them?
I looked very closely at one for a while called readme.io. It had a really nice interface, and we were coming from a WYSIWYG interface, and I really don't like most implementations of those. And this was it was a CMS that allowed you to write in Markdown, and I thought it was really well done. It's kind of optimized more for API docs, which we don't do. So in the end, it didn't quite offer everything that we needed, and we had a lot of really good in-house expertise. But that was one that I did seriously consider for a while.
Do you have any? Okay. Here's another question. We're talking about culture change, and we're talking about writers and engineers and who we're serving here. But here's a question that says, keep hearing a tension between the emphasis on speed and access, open docs and doing this, and keeping up with this, and then also maybe the value that we as writers and documentarians bring in terms of the craft of writing and content. And yes, this can seem, I think this is a big cultural issue. It can be seen as a conflict or a point of contention, or as one being sacrificed in. What are your thoughts about that? Do you feel? Okay.
So at least the contributions we received so far have been, shorter term. Somebody needs to add a paragraph to this page. Whereas I think there still is that idea of cultivating the content as a writer. I mean, I'm working on a set right now, an API set that is going to take a few months to build out. So we're still in the early stages, but contributions have been more targeted for us. And to address the previous question of off-the-shelf solutions, I don't actually have a lot of visibility into how the architecture works. I'm more a consumer of the service at Microsoft, and I evangelize it, and I try to push suggestions back to the engineering team. But I know that they are experimenting with static site pages. In fact, there's a new site, docs.microsoft.com, which is built with static pages. And if you compare that to MSDN pages, you'll notice that the load times are actually a lot faster because it's not loading a lot of the dynamic elements that are on the MSDN library.
Here's a question that I think is really challenging when you're trying to do something like Zach is talking about innovation, and you're talking about revolution and all of this. These are big turns. These are big changes. A lot of things are being put at risk here, when you do this kind of innovation. How do you decide yourselves if this is successful? What are you going to look at? Was it worth it? And how do you determine that? And how do you report it to our bosses?
So there's there are two pieces of that I can speak to. One is the actual process of transformation. How do you sustain yourself through it? How did we sustain ourselves through it? And how did we report our progress meaningfully? Occasionally we would get, well, so there's the process and then the outcome. How do we actually measure whether or not this was worthwhile to do? So for the actual process, we would get occasional requests from senior leadership to give a status update, to talk about what we were doing. And mostly that was an exercise in carefully crafted and articulated lies. Of being able to say, oh yes, we're making very meaningful progress, when really, I mean, I don't know. And what made it possible to keep doing that and to persist meaningfully in the face of uncertainty was having that very clear vision of what we wanted to accomplish at the end, which was to make it possible for everyone at Rackspace to create the best documentation to help users the most. And working backwards from that and continually working towards it was what guided us, even as we were occasionally making massive design changes midstream. How do we measure user satisfaction? Some of the results were immediately obvious. Page views, repository contributions internally, the number of teams that when they saw the finished product wanted to migrate all of their content out of their own proprietary silos into this thing that would become more available. So that was, some of the immediate results were just a large initial surge of contributors.
Which goes to the open docs thing again, right?
Right,
When you
right.
have this open ecosystem of contributors.
Right.
Yeah. John, do you have a...
Yeah, I would say that there's two things to look at when you're trying to measure success, even broadly. One is how easy is it for your team to publish, and how to get your engineers involved, and there's all those sorts of things that are involved. And some people can easily say, hey, look, we put it in this internal repository, it's very easy, engineers can do it. But if you're not looking at the content, what if the content's horrible? Like, what really matters is the people that are reading it. And how do you measure that success? Is it just how many people are not saying bad things about you? We get a lot of tweets about our documentation every so often, and more people. It's just like reviews on the App Store. You're going to get more people that are going to take the effort to say negative things than positive things. So that's very hard to measure. Is it just if you're not getting any feedback, does that mean it's not good, or is it really great? And so that I'm asking for people to tweet. I just want to see raw data to see what I can get out of that by probing that. But I think it's a very difficult thing to put numbers against. The only thing that I've thought of is doing, say, like you do one feedback cycle that's public before and then one after, the exact same one, and see. But that's just kind of like, you can see on a number like scale from 0 to 5 what the response is, and try to measure averages. That's the closest I've thought of that can be qualitative. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts about that.
Yeah, so like John said, I'm not sure for us if our content is any better. For the most part, we ported over our existing content. We did implement a new search, so I think search should be better, and that's a very key component of it. But I do know that before we started this project, we were several versions behind in our documentation, and now we're all caught up with the latest releases. In fact, we've usually documented the next release before it comes out, which is a major win. So for us, we did focus more on the writing and the publishing of the docs. And one of my hesitations was that our tech support people would not be technical enough to work with this workflow of running something from the command line. But they are fairly technical, but also they're excited about it, and nobody's really complained about it. And then at the very end, we did start using this forestry.io CMS, which connects to GitHub, so we can actually use either workflow. We can work on it locally and run Hugo, or we can use the forestry CMS, because we have some salespeople who update the sales FAQs, and so they're able to work with it. So I'm not sure if our content is better, but people are writing the docs more often, and that for us is definitely a win.
Yeah.
We've definitely had a steady stream of feature teams who want in on this new system, so that's one way that we measure success. There seems to be a lot of excitement over it. We'll see, it's still in the early stages, so we'll see if that's just people wanting to try the new thing, and whether that'll actually I'd be interested to hear, because Riona is entering the second year of her system, so I'm kind of hoping that over our second year upcoming, we'll be able to take this more out to scale.
One of the things I think we are finding now is in our first year, when we were in the stage that you're at, yes, we measured adoption. Do people want this? Are they doing it? That was one of but actually now it's kind of almost the standard. That's less important. But the three biggest problems that people had identified with docs were, A, docs didn't exist because they weren't part of the workflow, or they weren't. If they did exist, people couldn't find them. And that was around, they were scattered and fragmented across. But the third one was that even when you found a doc, you had no way of knowing if it was trustworthy or reliable or up to date. And that's, I think, the metric that is now the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I open my phone and I check our metrics. But the one that is most interesting now, because the doc process is integrated with the code workflow, is our engineers maintaining their docs, and we are measuring that by the number of change lists, the number of submissions that include both code and docs. So you update the code, and in the same change list, you update the docs that previously would have been made obsolete. And actually, we're seeing that about a third of submissions actually contain changes to both code and docs. So that is definitely one way. Zach?
I would love to ask a question.
Would you like a mic?
Thank you. I have to be a good boy and get the mic and permission to get the mic. So I actually want to ask a question of you guys about specific page analytics. 2 years ago, I sat up here and shitbagged your API because there was one part of the API docs that was a feature. It was one particular field that was an integer until it became a string, and that wasn't documented anywhere. So that talking about negative reactions to docs and whether that's valuable or not, do you have any way to correlate negative or positive mentions in page analytics? And whether negative or positive press is valuable, or how much it affects satisfaction ratings, the ability to express a negative view inside of the documentation, if that makes any sense. I guess the simple question is, what page analytics do you use and how meaningful are they?
You're looking right at me. So I guess I'll take it. I actually am not part of the team that does the analytics for the site. So I normally don't. I'm just getting on board with the transition and taking this on. So I'm not privy yet to what the stats are and who's hitting the pages. And so is your question, what's the correlation between the analytics of how many people are going to a site and frustration?
Yeah, do you have a way to measure that?
No, I don't have an answer for that right now, but that would be interesting if you can figure that out, especially if you could measure time on the page. If it's if you have short page views, then you could almost, can you say that was great, we did a great documentation job, they got it and they're off the page already. Or if someone's reading it for 20 minutes, does that mean they can't understand what you've written? And maybe that's something you need to address.
Or is it a short view and they're like, this sucks, and they move on?
Right.
How do you figure that out? And I actually don't know.
Historically, we've looked at pages that have high page views but low rankings. Try to target it that way. We haven't really looked at it a whole lot with the new OpenDoc framework, but that's what we've done historically.
So one of the things that comes up when we're talking about metrics and things like this is, it is a rule, code changes, docs decay, entropy sets in. And we're talking about the cultural changes, and we're also talking about now all our engineers and our contributors, they're trained and they know how to do this and they know how to make contributions. How do you encourage them to do so? How do you get your docs maintained? Anybody can create a doc set. Anyone can migrate it to a new framework. How do you get them to keep it up to date?
I would say it's too early on for us to really fully answer that. We're still evangelizing it to feature teams. Some feature teams aren't even aware that we're doing this. But bit by bit, we need to systemize it more. But it sounds like you guys have done a great job pushing that back into the engineering system.
So I keep thinking back to Neil's talk earlier, and it just makes me more and more glad that we've enlisted our customer support people to write our docs, because they're the ones that are on the front lines and they're hearing what people's complaints are, and now they are empowered to write docs. So actually one of our support people is leading a documentation project now. So he's seeing that people are on one group of pages when they really think that they're on a different one. And so he's feeling that pain and saying we should do something about this. So that for us I think is going to be really useful, that if our docs suck, our tech support people will know about it, but they are empowered to take on projects. So I just want to do my best to be supportive when they complain about the docs.
I would say with more teams that are focusing on specific areas of our API, it behooves them to make sure that the documentation is updated and working or whatnot. Because, for example, the media platform team, which just instituted the video uploads, they want to show to the company what they've been working on for so long is actually valuable to the company. In order to do that, you need people to use the API that they're putting in. And to do that, people need to be able to use it and understand it, and because it can be quite complex. Because it's like a chunked upload, so there's multiple steps to it. So they're very in depth in the documentation to make sure it's right.
Cool. So one of the things that we found as well is that we were talking about cultural differences. There's platform and culture, and we develop a platform, and we don't set policy. But what we found is that engineering teams are using the platform to set policies. For example, a lot of teams have put checks in place that you cannot submit a change unless you have set a docs flag. You know, and that a lot of people are having policies in place that you must document. It's part of your perf, it's part of, you know, your performance, you know, there's this kind of thing. It's G3 Docker, it didn't happen. And that was something that we needed quite a lot of support from senior engineering teams to do it, and that's where a lot of evangelism came in. But yeah, it's actually to see teams doing that themselves, that they're forcing this kind of behavior, which is what we want. So, and doing it by themselves. We don't have much time left, but I've seen a lot of people talk about Markdown and RST and all of these. Why Markdown, or why ASCII doc, or why whatever? Are you happy with it? It has limitations compared to HTML and XML and stuff. What are your thoughts?
So let me just throw this out. For more info on the architecture, I'd recommend coming to our unconference tomorrow, because we actually have a couple members from the folks who engineered our system who could, you know, fill you in with more detail. So I don't know specifically why Markdown was chosen, but one thing that we've noticed with it is that, you know, obviously it's better suited for conceptual documentation. We have a lot of automation that runs against our structured XML. So for now, we still have our reference docs in the structured XML, and we're focusing on the conceptual docs first. So the question is, are we going to put all of our API docs into Markdown, thereby losing all that structure that we can automate against? You know, then we would gain the benefits of the OpenDoc environment, but we would lose a lot of the benefits that we have being able to automate against it. So that's one of the issues we have with using Markdown, is that, you know, it's just a big text file, so you can't program against it.
I have a feeling I'm going to be thinking about this question a lot in the next year. We are currently in kind of a honeymoon phase, I think, with our Markdown, because right now we're just celebrating how much better our workflow is than it used to be. You know, before it was either you worked with a crappy WYSIWYG editor that would strip things out or sometimes not save things, or you had to write in straight HTML. So being able to write in Markdown is really kind of a joy. But I think we're just starting to transition into a phase where we're realizing some of the limitations of it. So I've actually been talking to some people about Sphinx, and I'm excited to dig deeper into maybe some more powerful things that we can use. But I like Markdown because it's really easy to learn, really easy to understand. We don't do API docs. We do a lot of it's all end user facing visual stuff. So it works pretty well from that. And the bottom line for us is that it works and everybody can use it, but it may not be optimal, but I don't know if anything is.
Yeah, I would just say similar. I think the simplicity of it, it's less prone to errors if you were to do HTML editing. I think that's one of the main reasons. I also like it because I don't know yet, but I feel like it's kind of not future-proof, but is something that you can easily export to something else when the next great thing comes in Write the Docs 2025. And we can go to this other technology. It seems pretty easy to move to something else.
Absolutely.
So this is actually a fight that I lost. I didn't want to use restructured text. Restructured text, Markdown is lovely because it's an easy-to-use language that affects display. Restructured text is easy to learn the display aspects of, but it's scalar in power that the more you use, it can also become a semantic language. That curve is not gentle, nor is it particularly smooth. I wanted to use ASCII doc instead, and I'm still looking for an opportunity to test drive it in the field. Restructured text, it's natively supported in GitHub, but we use Markdown only for things like release notes, things that don't require a lot of semantic layering. Things that are very conceptual in nature. But we use restructured text, it works. I'm not convinced that it's the best.
So we actually have 3 minutes left. So if somebody is in a project or on a team and they want to start transforming this documentation process, perhaps by integrating docs and code in source control, you have about 45 seconds each. Where to start? What do you do first? The single best thing you learned?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, try to plan out your adoption as much as you can, because we kind of got underway. There was a lot of excitement. As we got partway out, we kind of realized, we need to change the URL. Get a little bit further, we realized, we need a way to handle confidential information. We don't want to put, we love GitHub, but our legal department says don't put the top secret stuff on third-party servers. So, and those are choices that kind of influence what direction you go at crucial junctures. And so if you're kind of making those down the road, then you kind of have to backtrack and do it again. So, yeah.
Don't wait. It's easier to get forgiveness than permission. It's a lot easier to get people to approve of an idea if you have a thing that they can approve of first.
Amen to that, and my experience, seriously, if forgiveness is better than permission, but if you're fixing a problem, you're going to need neither. That is the truth.
Building on that, I would say find an overachieving developer and get them excited about working on a fun project that they can work on in their spare time. They'll get really excited about being able to work on something new, and they'll probably come up with something awesome that will get other people excited.
Yes.
Also kind of similar, I would say make sure you don't have too many cooks in the kitchen when you're making these decisions. That was applause. Because you're going to have 20 different answers with 20 different people. If you can get a small group of people to make those decisions and say, this is what we're going to go with, and these are the reasons why we've chose it, that's what we've done, and we're getting to that point where we're going out more broadly internally, and people are like, wait, why are these decisions been made? What's happening? But we're like, well, we're already there. We're going. Here we go. And so it's happening, and it's something that wouldn't, because when we first did our other change 2 years ago, it took a long time to get there. So we worked with a much smaller team this time around, and it's been great.
So it's like move fast, but take the time to think things through and talk to influential people, but not too many.
Yes, it's great.
Or something.
We did the same thing. It was like, we want, why are you doing this thing? Why didn't you ask us? Oh, too late.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely +1 on that.
Okay, awesome. You slay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rion.
Okay.